My name's Patricia Sullivan. I'm 32 years old, a tech investor who built an empire from nothing in a Malibu family where winning was everything. And I'm here to tell you about the Thanksgiving that broke my family for good. I pulled into my parents' beachfront house, my 10-year-old Toyota Corolla rattling up the driveway, and there was my sister Mary on the porch, standing next to her shiny Tesla, eyeing my car with that smug look she'd perfected. Her husband Ethan, right beside her, both of them chuckling like my showing up was some kind of joke. Where are you tuning in from? Drop a comment below. Hit that like button and subscribe, because this story's about to get wild, and you won't want to miss what's next. Mary's always been the one to make sure everyone knew she was better. With her fancy job at Horizon Innovations, flaunting her big house and designer clothes, while I kept my real work hidden, running Horizon as the secret CEO through my investment firm, Costal Ventures, worth $11 billion. And in a few hours, a company call at 6:30 was going to flip her whole world upside down. I walked up the steps, carrying a pumpkin pie I'd baked from Mom's recipe, and Mary's eyes zeroed in on my sweater, just something I grabbed from a thrift store, because it was comfortable. "Patricia, you actually came," she said, her voice carrying into the house, full of that fake pity she'd spent years mastering. "I figured you'd ditch after last year when I had to explain why you're still stuck doing those tiny consulting jobs." She air-quoted consulting like it was a punchline, and Ethan smirked, sipping his wine like he was in on it. Last Thanksgiving, Mary had turned her toast into a lecture about success, basically calling me a nobody while Dad nodded along, and I'd kept quiet, not ready to reveal what I'd built. "I'm here for Mom and Dad," I said, keeping my voice steady. But she kept going. "That car of yours?" she said, pointing at my Toyota. "It's honestly a disgrace to the family. Ethan and I could help you get something that doesn't make you look like you're broke." It was her usual move, offering help that was really just a way to rub in how much better she thought she was. "It works fine," I said, pushing past her into the house. Inside, the dining room was packed, the table loaded with turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, all set out on Mom's best china. A big Thanksgiving spread. Dad, Bradley, stood by the bar, 62, and still acting like he owned the room, talking up Mary's latest deal like she was running Silicon Valley. Mom, Jennifer, was fussing over the table, trying to keep things calm, but her face showed she was bracing for trouble. "Patricia, you brought the pie," Mom said, taking it from me, her voice warm but nervous, like she knew things were about to get messy. "Mary's been telling us about her new role at Horizon," she added, glancing at Dad, who cut in. "She's running their whole communications strategy. Big deal for the tech world." His eyes barely met mine, like I was just there to fill a seat. Mary swooped in, all smiles, and said, "Yeah, I'm launching a campaign that's going to put Horizon on top. You should visit the office sometime. Patricia, see what real work looks like." Everyone went quiet for a second, feeling the jab, but nobody called it out. My cousin Sophie gave me a look, like she wanted to say something but knew it wouldn't help. I nodded, grabbed a glass of water, and thought about the call that was going to change everything. The house was buzzing. Aunts, uncles, cousins everywhere, some helping Mom in the kitchen, others arguing about the football game on television. Mary was holding court near the bar, going on about her campaign, how it was going to make Horizon the leader in clean energy, how the board was obsessed with her ideas. "It's a game changer," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, her eyes flicking to me. "Not everyone can handle this kind of work." Ethan nodded, like her personal hype man, and Dad chimed in. "That's my girl, always setting the standard." It was the same old routine: Mary the star, me the nobody. Mom tried to shift things, asking me about my work, but Mary cut in before I could answer. laughing. Oh, Patricia's still doing her consulting thing, right? Helping startups with their little issues? Ethan joined in, saying, "Must be tough keeping those apps from crashing." Dad smirked. Like he agreed I was wasting my time, something like that? I said, keeping it short. But I was counting down to the moment I'd show them all. Sophie pulled me aside near the kitchen, her voice low. "Don't let Mary get to you. She's always been like this." Sophie's an interior designer, always trying to keep the peace, but even she knew Mary was relentless. "I'm used to it," I said. But it wasn't true, not really. Growing up, Mary was always the one Dad bragged about, the one who got the awards, the promotions, the attention. I'd gone my own way, building coastal ventures, turning failing tech companies into winners. But I kept it quiet, knowing they'd never believe me. "You're up to something, aren't you?" Sophie said, eyeing my watch. A Vacheron Constantine I'd bought after a big deal. "Just a gift," I said, dodging her question. She didn't push, but I could tell she was curious. Back at the table, Mom was trying to get everyone seated for the family photo. A big Thanksgiving tradition. "Patricia, Mary, come on," she called, waving us to the patio. Mary strutted out, phone in hand, talking about some executive call she had to take. "It's a huge deal," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The CEO's announcing something major at 6:30, and they want me on it. My campaign's getting all the attention." Dad beamed. "Like she'd just won a prize. That's how you do it," he said. Mom looked at me, trying to include me. "Patricia, you've got work stuff too, right?" Before I could answer, Mary laughed. "What? Another startup crisis? Don't let us keep you from your big consulting emergencies." Ethan snorted, and Dad shook his head, like I was a disappointment. "I've got a call too," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Work thing." Mary raised an eyebrow, her tone pure sarcasm. "Oh, really? What kind of consulting could be that urgent on Thanksgiving?" I just smiled, thinking about how her world was about to flip. The photo was chaos. Everyone squeezing in. Dad barking orders about who should stand where. Mary planted herself front and center, while I ended up half hidden behind Shoe Richard. "Smile, everyone," Mom said. But you could feel the tension, like everyone knew something was off. After the photo, Mary was back on her phone, prepping for her call, acting like she was running the company. Dad clapped her on the shoulder, saying, "Keep making us proud." I slipped away to the study, checking my phone. 5:30. My COO, Clarangwian, had texted, "Everything's set. Merger announcement at 6:30. You ready?" I sent back a quick reply, knowing this was the moment I'd been waiting for. When I'd show them who I'd become, I was back at the dining room table, dessert plates being passed around, Mom's pecan pie and my pumpkin pie sliced up. But all I could focus on was Mary, sitting there acting as if she owned the entire tech world, going on about some new clean energy initiative she'd pitched at Horizon Innovations, talking about how it was getting her invited to all the big industry events. Dad, Bradley, was hanging on her every word, his face beaming with pride, while Mom, Jennifer, kept trying to keep things calm, her hands fidgeting with her napkin, knowing the tension was about to boil over. I sat there, picking at my pie, keeping my secret locked down, knowing the 6:30 call was coming. But Mary's voice was relentless, and every word she said made me want to scream. Even though I knew I had to wait for the right moment to show them all who I really was, Mary leaned forward, making sure everyone was listening, talking about how her initiative had landed her a spot on a major tech panel. "They're calling my project a breakthrough in clean energy," she said, her voice loud and confident, ensuring the whole table heard every word. "I presented it to the board last month. And they're already planning to roll it out globally, starting with Asia. This is the kind of work that puts Horizon ahead of everyone else. Ethan, her husband, nodded, saying, "She's getting calls from industry bigwigs now. They want her to speak at every major conference." Dad jumped in, his voice booming. "That's my daughter, showing Silicon Valley how it's done. You don't get that kind of attention by thinking small." The way he said it felt like a jab at me, as if I was just some nobody who didn't matter, because I wasn't out there shouting about my work. Mom tried to shift things, her voice shaky, trying to stop a fight before it started. "Let's talk about everyone's plans for the holidays," she said, but Mary cut her off, smiling sharply. "Actually, Mom, I'm keynoting at a clean energy summit in San Francisco next week. They're already talking about giving me an award for this project." Quote. I took a sip of water, trying to stay calm, but it was tough when Mary was acting as if she was the only one doing anything worthwhile. And Dad was just eating it up, treating her as if she was the family's pride and joy. I'd spent years building coastal ventures, turning struggling tech companies into leaders, and running Horizon, but I kept it quiet because I didn't need Dad's approval. Or so I kept telling myself. Ethan piled on, his tone smug. "She's got the whole industry buzzing. Not everyone can handle that kind of pressure." Dad nodded, saying, "That's what makes her stand out. She doesn't just work, she wins." It was the same old story. Mary getting all the praise, while I was just the younger sister who couldn't keep up, even though I'd been the one approving her precious initiative, making sure Horizon stayed on top. Margaret, who used to organize big Hollywood events, tried to change the subject. Her voice forced but bright. "Jennifer, are we doing the family charades game after dessert? It's always a crowd pleaser." But Mary wasn't letting anyone steal her moment, cutting in with a laugh. "Charades is great, Margaret, but I'm kind of busy reshaping clean energy. My project's getting a feature in TechCrunch next month, and they're calling me a trailblazer." Dad's eyes lit up, and he said, "That's how you make your mark. Mary, you don't just follow, you lead." It was as if I didn't exist, as if my whole life was invisible because I wasn't out there boasting. Mom tried again, looking at me with that desperate look. "Patricia's got her own projects, right? Tell us about them." But Mary cut her off, her voice full of fake concern. "Oh, Mom, let's not bore everyone with Patricia's startup stuff. I mean, helping small companies fix their problems is nice, but it's not exactly changing the industry." Ethan chuckled, saying, "Yeah, must be tough, keeping those apps from falling apart." Dad didn't laugh, but he gave me that look, as if he was disappointed I wasn't more like Mary. Sophie, sitting next to me, leaned over, her voice low and frustrated. "She's acting as if she invented the wheel," she said, trying to make me feel better. Sophie's an interior designer, always noticing when things are off, but even she couldn't do much with Mary in this mood. "It's fine," I said, but it wasn't. Not when Dad was treating Mary as if she was the only one who mattered. I'd landed a $10 million contract for Horizon last year, but I kept my name out of it, letting the board think I was some mysterious figure working through proxies like Clara. "You're taking this better than I would," Sophie said, her eyes narrowing, as if she could tell I was holding something back. I just nodded, keeping my secret tight, thinking about how I'd been the one making every major decision Mary was taking credit for. Who Richard, across the table, gave me a look, as if he was trying to figure me out. He's 60, a retired software engineer who's always been good at reading people. "You're awfully quiet tonight." "Patricia," he said, his voice calm but curious. "What's the latest with your work?" I knew he was digging, probably because he'd noticed my watch. A Vacheron Constantine I'd bought after a big deal, and he'd once asked me about my company's setup, saying it looked too complex for just consulting. "Just keeping startups on track," I said, keeping it vague. but he didn't buy it. "You've got a sharp mind for business," he said, loud enough for others to hear. "I'd bet you're doing more than you let on." Dad overheard and snorted, saying, "Business is one thing, Richard, but Mary's out there making headlines." Mary smirked, saying, "Yeah, not everyone's built for the spotlight." Ethan nodded, adding, "She's got the whole tech world talking about her now." Quote, the dinner kept going, everyone digging into dessert, passing plates. But the air was heavy, as if everyone could feel the fight coming. Mary wouldn't stop, talking about how her initiative was getting her invited to all the top events, how she was being called a game changer in clean energy. "I'm not just working at Horizon," she said, her voice carrying across the table. "I'm building its future. That's what leadership is about." Dad was all over it, saying, "That's my girl, always thinking bigger." It was as if I was nothing because I wasn't out there shouting about my work. Ethan piled on, saying, "She's got offers from every major player now. Not everyone can handle that kind of attention." Mom tried one more time, her voice shaking. "Patricia's doing well too, Bradley. She's always been smart with her work." But Dad waved her off, saying, "Smart's fine, but Mary's out there changing the game." It was as if they were performing for the whole table, and I was just there to make Mary look better by comparison. I checked my phone under the table, 6:15, just minutes until the call, and I could feel the moment coming, when I'd finally show them who I was. Mary was still going, talking about how her TechCrunch feature was going to put Horizon on every investor's radar, how she was the one making it happen. "I'm not just a director," she said, looking right at me. "I'm the one people look to when they think of Horizon. That's what matters." Dad nodded, saying, "That's what sets you apart, Mary. You don't settle." Sophie whispered to me again, her voice tight. "She's unbearable tonight." I nodded, but I didn't say anything. Just kept my focus on the clock, knowing I'd been the one calling the shots on every move Mary was taking credit for. Mom called for another toast, trying to keep things together. "The family," she said, raising her glass. But Mary cut in, saying, "To making a difference? To leaving a legacy." Dad clinked his glass with hers, saying, "Domari," carrying the family name. I raised my glass too, but it was just to get through it. Knowing the call was about to change everything, I slipped back into Dad's study, shutting the door on the clinking of glasses and family chatter. My phone buzzing with a final text from Clara, my COO, confirming the board was ready and the merger announcement was set. So I opened my laptop, knowing this 6:30 call was about to drop a bomb on Mary and everyone else who thought I was just nobody with no ambition. The Thanksgiving dinner was still going strong out there, everyone cleaning up dessert plates, Mom trying to keep the peace, but all I could think about was Mary, acting as if she was the heart and soul of Horizon Innovations, bragging about her big project, while Dad, Bradley, kept praising her as if she was the only one worth mentioning, and Mom, Jennifer, kept failing to stop the tension from boiling over. I'd kept my secret for 3 years, running Horizon as the CEO through my investment firm, Coastal Ventures, worth $11 billion, letting Mary think she was the star. But now, with the call starting, I was ready to show them all who I really was, and it was going to hit hard. My laptop screen came to life, showing the waiting room for Horizon's company-wide video call, with over 300 people logged in, executives and department heads from our offices in Silicon Valley, Shanghai, and Berlin, all expecting a standard update. Mary's face popped up in one corner, all polished and professional, sitting in the guest room with her notebook ready, probably thinking this call was about her project getting more praise. She had no idea what was coming. Clara texted one last time. "Live in 1 minute. You set?" I adjusted my webcam, keeping my expression calm, thinking about how Mary had spent the whole dinner acting as if she was the future of clean energy, how Dad had called her the family's pride, while I was just the sister who didn't measure up. The clock hit 6:30, and I started the call, my voice steady, ready to turn everything upside down. "Good evening, everyone," I said, watching the grid of faces on my screen, most of them confused, not recognizing me, except for Clara and a few trusted executives who knew the truth. For those who haven't met me, I've been the majority owner and CEO of Horizon Innovations for 3 years, operating through my investment firm. Coastal Ventures. Mary's face froze, her eyes wide, her professional mask cracking as she processed what I'd just said. I kept going, not giving her a moment to recover. Today, we're announcing a merger with Coastal's AI division to form Horizon Coastal Global, positioning us as the leader in AI-driven clean energy, with projected growth of 25% in the first year. The board members nodded on screen, already briefed, but the rest of the team looked stunned, and Mary, she was just staring, her jaw tight, as if her entire career was unraveling. I laid out the merger details, talking about how our AI tech would transform energy distribution, how we'd landed a $15 million contract with a global energy firm last quarter, all while watching Mary, her shock turning into something sharper, as if she was trying to figure out how she'd missed this. Nobody at Horizon knew I was the owner, not even Mary, who'd been climbing the ranks. Thinking she was reporting to some distant CEO, I'd kept it that way on purpose, letting her think she was the big shot. While I built an empire worth $11 billion, Clara took over to walk through the integration plans, showing timelines and team structures. But I kept my focus on Mary, who was gripping her pen so hard it looked as if it might snap, her face a mix of disbelief and anger. The call was professional, smooth, but you could feel the undercurrent, as if everyone was trying to process that their CEO was someone they'd never seen. And for Mary, it was personal. She'd been working for me, her little sister, all along. When I opened the floor for questions, Mary's hand shot up, her voice cold but controlled, as if she was fighting to keep it together. "Miss Sullivan," she said, spitting out my name. "Why keep your role hidden from your own team? Especially someone like me. Who's been leading your communications?" Seems like a deliberate move to blindside certain people. The jab was obvious, and a few executives glanced at her, probably wondering why she was so heated. I kept my voice even, as if I'd prepared for this. Coastal Ventures operates quietly to let companies like Horizon build their own identity. Transparency now is part of our merger strategy, aligning all teams for growth. It was a solid answer. But Mary's eyes narrowed, as if she wasn't buying it. "Convenient timing," she said, her tone sharp. "Doing this on Thanksgiving, with family around. Very strategic." The way she said it made it clear she thought I'd done this to humiliate her. And maybe there was a small part of me that wanted her to feel what I'd felt, but I wasn't going to admit that. The study door swung open, and Dad stormed in, his face twisted with irritation, as if he'd heard something from the dining room and didn't believe it. "Patricia, what's this about?" he said, his voice loud enough to carry over the call. "You're saying you're the CEO of Horizon? Since when?" Mom followed, her hands clasped tight, as if she was trying to hold everything together. "Bradley, let's talk about this later," she said, but he brushed her off, staring at me as if I'd just claimed I was running the country. "This is ridiculous," he said, crossing his arms. "You've been messing around with startups, not running companies like Mary's." Mary's face on the screen tightened, as if she was glad Dad was backing her up, and she jumped in, her voice louder now. "Yeah, Patricia, explain how you went from fixing apps to owning my company. Or is this just a way to make me look stupid in front of everyone?" I took a breath, keeping my focus on the call. Ignoring Dad for a moment, I started Coastal Ventures 6 years ago. I said, addressing the team but staring at Mary. We acquired Horizon 3 years ago, and I've been leading it ever since, turning it into a company that's now merging with our AI division to lead the industry. The board nodded again, but Mary's eyes were burning, as if she was trying to piece together every moment she'd bragged to me. Dad wasn't having it. Stepping closer to my laptop. "This doesn't add up," he said. "If you're some big CEO, why are you living like you're barely getting by? Sounds like you're trying to upstage your sister." Mom put a hand on his arm, saying, "Bradley, please. We can sort this out as a family." But he shook her off, and Mary piled on, her voice sharp through the speakers. "You could have told me. Patricia, you let me go on about my work, my projects. Knowing you were in charge, that's low. Even for you." Quote. The call was still live, and I could see executives shifting uncomfortably, probably wishing they weren't witnessing this family drama. Clara stepped in, her voice firm. "Let's move to the integration plans," she said, trying to get things back on track. But Mary wasn't done. "No. I want to know why my own sister thought it was okay to hide this from me," she said. Her face flushed. "You sat through every dinner, listening to me talk about Horizon, and you never said a word? Were you just waiting to make me look like a fool?" I kept my voice steady, even with Dad's glare burning into me. "I was doing my job," I said. "Running a company, making decisions, like approving your project." That hit her hard, and she leaned back, her eyes flashing, as if she was realizing every move she'd made was under my watch. Dad snorted, as if he still thought it was a joke. "You expect us to believe you're running a company worth billions? You've never shown that kind of drive." Mom tried again, her voice trembling. "Bradley, let's take this off the call. Patricia, Mary, we can talk later." But Mary cut her off, her voice icy. "No. Mom." She chose to do this now, in front of everyone, on Thanksgiving. "Let's have it out." I could have explained, could have said the timing was about the merger, about market strategy, but he didn't. I just looked at her on the screen and said, "You assumed I was nothing. Mary, I didn't make you look like anything." The call wrapped up, Clara rushing through the final slides, and faces started disappearing. But Mary stayed on, her expression hard, as if she was holding back a storm. Dad was still pacing, muttering about how this couldn't be real. Mom looking as if she was about to break. And I knew this was heading somewhere we'd never come back from. I closed my laptop, the screen still dark from the call that had just turned everything upside down, and headed out of the study, knowing Mary was waiting for me in the guest room, her demand for a private talk hanging heavy in the air, while the Thanksgiving dinner cleanup was starting outside, plates clattering and family voices buzzing. I walked through the dining room, where Mom was stacking dessert dishes, her face tight with worry, and Dad was still muttering about how my announcement couldn't be real, his skepticism making my blood boil. But he didn't stop, heading straight for the guest room where Mary was waiting, her posture stiff, ready for a fight. The whole night had been building to this, her bragging about her big project, Dad praising her as if I was nothing, Mom trying to keep things from falling apart. And now, after I'd revealed I was the CEO of Horizon Innovations, worth $11 billion through my investment firm, Coastal Ventures, Mary was about to face the truth, and I knew this conversation was going to be the end of us. I stepped into the guest room, and Mary was standing by the window, her arms crossed, her face a mix of anger and betrayal, as if I'd personally stabbed her in the back. "What was that?" "Patricia?" she said, her voice low but sharp, cutting through the hum of family noise outside. "You drop that you're my boss? In front of the entire company, on Thanksgiving of all days, and you think we're just going to move on?" I stood my ground, keeping my voice steady. Even though her words hit hard, I didn't drop it to hurt you. Mary, I was announcing a merger, a business decision. You just happened to be on the call. She laughed, a bitter sound that filled the room. Business decision? You could have told me privately? Years ago. But you let me go on. Thinking I was climbing the ladder, while you were the one pulling the strings. That's not business. That's personal. Her accusation stung, because there was a part of me that had wanted her to know, to see that I wasn't the failure she thought. But I wasn't going to admit that now. You spent years acting as if I was nothing. I said, my voice calm but firm. Talking down to me? Making sure everyone knew you were the successful one. I didn't owe you the truth. Mary's eyes flashed, and she stepped closer, her voice rising. You let me look like a fool out there. Patricia, I've been building my career, and you were sitting back, watching, knowing you owned the company. How do you think that feels? Before I could answer, the door opened, and Dad stormed in, his face red with irritation. What's going on here? He said, his voice loud, as if he was ready to shut this down. Patricia, you expect us to believe you're running some billion-dollar company? You've never shown that kind of ambition? Mom followed, her voice shaky. Bradley, please, let's talk calmly. We're a family. But Dad ignored her, staring at me as if I'd made it all up. This sounds like a stunt to make Mary look bad, he said, pointing at me. She's out there making headlines. And you pull this? I turned to him, trying to keep my cool, but his words were like a punch. I've been running Horizon for 3 years. Dad, I built it into a company worth $11 billion. That's not a stunt, that's real. Mary scoffed, cutting in. Real? You hid it from your own sister? Let me talk about my work, my projects. Knowing you were the one in charge, you wanted me to feel stupid. I shook my head, but she kept going, her voice louder now. You could have said something, anything, but you chose to blindside me in front of the whole company. That's not leadership, that's spite. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his arms crossed, nodding at Mary's words. She's right, he said, his tone smug. That was a low move. Patricia, you knew it would humiliate her. I looked at him, my patience thinning. I didn't plan it to humiliate anyone. I was doing my job, announcing a merger that's going to make Horizon the leader in clean energy. What? Mom stepped forward, her hands raised, trying to calm things down. Please. Both of you. Let's talk this through. We don't need to fight. But Mary wasn't listening. Her eyes locked on me. Talk it through? She lied to me. Mom. For years, I've been working my ass off, thinking I was making my mark. And she was the one calling the shots. You think I can just let that go? Dad jumped in, his voice sharp. Mary's earned her place. Patricia, you don't get to come in here and act as if you're better because you kept some secret. You should have told us. His words hit hard, as if I was the one who'd done something wrong. As if Mary's years of putting me down didn't count. I didn't tell you because you never listened. I said, my voice steady but edged with years of frustration. You've always picked Mary. Dad. Always acted as if I was less. I built something bigger than any of you imagined. And you still think I'm the one who doesn't measure up. Quote. Mary's face twisted, and she stepped closer, her voice almost a shout. Don't turn this on us. You hid the truth because you wanted to hold this over me, to make me look small. You enjoyed watching me think I was succeeding, knowing you could pull the rug out. I shook my head, but she kept going. You could have told me privately, given me a heads up, but you chose to do it in front of everyone, on a call, with the whole family here. That's not just business, that's cruel. I felt the weight of her words, because maybe there was a tiny part of me that had wanted her to see. I wasn't the nobody she thought. But I wasn't going to say that. You made your own assumptions, Mary, I said. You decided I was a failure. And I let you. Because I didn't need your approval to build what I did. Quote. Dad snorted, as if he still didn't buy it. Build what? Some company you claim is worth billions? You've never shown that kind of drive. Patricia. Mary's out there, making real moves. Mom tried again, her voice breaking. Bradley. Stop. We need to listen to Patricia. To both of them. But he waved her off, and Ethan jumped in, his tone defensive. Mary's right. You planned this to make her look bad. Patricia. It's not fair. Sophie, who'd been lingering in the doorway, finally spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. That's not true. Ethan. Patricia's been dealing with all of you putting her down for years. Maybe she had her reasons. But Dad ignored her. And Mary turned on Sophie, snapping, Stay out of this. Sophie, you don't know what it's like to be blindsided like this. Cuddy. He took a step toward Mary. My voice calm but sharp. You want to talk about blindsided? How about every dinner? Every holiday? Where you made sure everyone knew you were better than me? You never once asked what I was doing? Never cared. Because you were too busy making yourself the star. Mary's eyes widened, but she didn't back down. I worked for everything I have, she said. You don't get to take that away just because you were playing some secret CEO game. Dad stepped between us, his voice booming. Enough. Patricia, you don't get to act as if you're the victim here. Mary's been carrying the family name. And you pull this? Mom grabbed his arm, pleading. Bradley, please. We're falling apart, but he shook her off. And Mary's voice cut through, cold and final. I'm done. Patricia, I can't work for you. Can't be in this family with you. Not after this. I looked at her, feeling the weight of years of resentment. You don't have to, I said. I've been fine without you looking down on me, and I'll be fine now. Mary turned and walked out, Ethan following, as if he was her shadow. Dad stared at me, shaking his head, as if I'd betrayed them all. You've made a mess of this family, he said, storming out. Mom stood there, tears in her eyes, saying, Patricia, we can fix this. But I shook my head, walking past her toward the beach. The sound of the waves calling me away from the chaos. Chu Richard caught up with me outside, his voice quiet. You did what you had to, but this won't be easy. I nodded, knowing he was right. But the fight with Mary, with Dad, had gone too far, and there was no going back. 6 months after that Thanksgiving disaster, I was standing in my office at Horizon Coastal Global's new headquarters in Santa Monica, staring out at the city lights, the weight of everything that happened still sitting heavy on my shoulders. Even as the company I'd built hit numbers nobody could have predicted. The merger I'd announced that night, the one that turned my family upside down, had pushed Horizon to the top of the clean energy game, with contracts pouring in, including a $20 million deal with a global consortium. But none of it felt as good as it should have. Not after Mary walked away. Dad turned his back, and Mom's attempts to fix things fell flat. I'd spent that night on the beach, walking away from the fight, knowing there was no going back. And now, half a year later, I was running a company worth $11 billion. But the family I'd grown up with was gone, scattered like the dessert plates we'd left behind that night, and I was left wondering if winning was worth this kind of cost. The office was buzzing, my team preparing for our first big quarterly review since the merger. Charts and projections plastered across the boardroom screens, showing a 30% growth spike that had analysts calling us the next big thing in tech. Clara, my COO, was running point, her voice echoing through the glass walls as she briefed the team. But I couldn't shake the memory of Mary's face on that call. The way she'd looked when I said I was the CEO, or the way she'd screamed at me on the beach, saying she was done with me, done with the family. She'd quit Horizon the next day, sent in her resignation by email. No explanation, just a cold note saying she was moving on. And by January, I'd heard through industry chatter she'd joined a rival firm in San Francisco. Some startup trying to compete with us, probably thinking she could outdo me. I didn't hear from her directly, not a single call or text, and that silence was louder than any fight we'd ever had. Back at the family front, things weren't any better. Dad had called once, a week after Thanksgiving, his voice gruff, still not buying that I'd built Horizon from nothing, saying I should have told him sooner, as if I owed him an explanation for my success. Mary's making her own way now, he'd said, as if I was the one who'd pushed her out. You didn't have to do it like that. I'd hung up, not wanting to argue, knowing he'd always pick her side, no matter what I'd achieved. Mom sent texts every few weeks, little messages about family dinners, or asking if I'd visit, but I could tell she was stuck, trying to keep everyone together when we were already broken. I didn't reply much, not because I didn't care, but because every message reminded me of that night, of Dad's words, of Mary's final jab that she was done with me. Sophie reached out a few times, her texts popping up on my phone as I walked into the boardroom for the quarterly review. "Family's not the same without you," she wrote last month, trying to get me to come to a cousin's birthday. But I'd passed, knowing Mary would be there, knowing Dad would still look at me as if I'd betrayed them. Sophie was the only one who seemed to get it, who saw how Mary and Dad had pushed me out. But even she couldn't fix it. "You did something incredible," she'd said in one message, "but they're too stubborn to see it." I appreciated her, but it didn't fill the gap left by the family I'd lost. Richard had called once too, his voice calm, saying he'd always known I was up to something big, but even he admitted the family was split, with Margaret trying to plan get-togethers that nobody showed up to, as if we could pretend things were normal. The boardroom was packed, executives and board members ready for the presentation, the screens showing our latest numbers, a 30% jump in clean energy contracts that had investors buzzing. Clara handed me a tablet with the final figures, saying, "These are better than we projected. You've built something unstoppable." I nodded, but her words didn't land the way they should have. Not when I was standing here alone, without the sister who used to be my competition, without the family who'd never believed in me. I stepped to the front, starting the presentation, my voice steady as I walked through the numbers, talking about how our AI tech was changing the industry, how we'd landed a $15 million partnership with a European energy firm. The room was all nods, board members impressed, but I kept thinking about Mary, wondering if she'd seen the headlines, if she cared that the company she'd left was soaring without her. One of my executives, Michael, leaned over after my opening, his voice low. "The numbers are incredible, but the team's still talking about Mary leaving. Her campaigns had a spark." I nodded, knowing he was right. Mary had a knack for making things shine. Even if I'd been the one approving her budgets, we're doing fine without her, I said, but it didn't feel true. Not completely. The truth was, I'd won the professional game, but the personal cost was heavier than I'd expected. I wrapped up the presentation, handing it over to Clara for the details, and stepped to the side, my phone buzzing with a message from Mom. "Can we talk soon?" it read, and I could almost hear her pleading voice, the same one from Thanksgiving when she'd tried to stop the fight. He didn't reply. Not sure what I'd even say. Margaret had tried to call a few weeks back, leaving a voicemail about a family barbecue she was planning, saying, "We miss you, Patricia. It's not the same without both of you girls." But I knew Mary wouldn't show if I did, and I wasn't ready to face Dad's judgment or Mom's desperate attempts to fix things. Richard had been the only one who didn't push, sending a short email after the merger news hit, saying, "You've done something remarkable. Don't let the family stuff take that away." I appreciated it, but it didn't change the fact that the family I'd grown up with was gone. Split apart by that night on the beach, when Mary said she was done, when Dad called me a disappointment, when Mom couldn't hold us together. As the presentation ended, the room filled with chatter. Executives talking about the next steps. The board planning a press conference to announce our growth. Clara came over, her voice quiet. "You okay? You've been quiet today." I nodded, saying, "Just focused on the numbers." But she knew me better than that, giving me a look that said she saw through it. I walked back to my office, the city lights stretching out below, and checked my phone again. Another text from Sophie. "Mary's at that rival firm now?" She wrote. "She's doing well, but it's not the same. You should reach out." I didn't reply, knowing there was no point. Mary had made her choice, and so had I. Back when I decided to reveal the truth, knowing it would break us apart. Ethan had posted something online last week, a photo of him and Mary at her new company's launch event, her smiling for the cameras, as if she'd moved on without a hitch. I didn't follow her, didn't need to, but the industry was small, and word got around. She was building her own name now, away from Horizon, away from me. And maybe that was what she wanted. Dad hadn't called again, and I didn't expect him to. Not after he'd made it clear he thought I'd betrayed Mary, as if her years of putting me down didn't count. Mom's texts kept coming, but they felt empty, like she was trying to hold on to something that was already gone. Iseded Mudisk, the office quiet now, the team gone home, and thought about that Thanksgiving, how I'd thought revealing the truth would feel like a win. But now, with the company soaring and my family broken, it just felt like a void.